Welcome back everybody, your SimCFI here. We almost forgot to cover one of the more iconic general aviation airplanes of all time, and that's the Piper J-3 Cub. This is one of my favorite airplanes, and any other airplane of its type as well. I used to own a Porterfield CP-65 Collegiate. It's very similar to this airplane, it's got the same engine, and you can see some videos of me flying it in a playlist that I've titled Porterfield CP-65, and I got a video in there of me hand starting it as well. So let's get started with this cub. Let's do the Shift 3 menu, take down the tie downs. That puts us into the airplane. And so let's go over the cub real quick. We got the Shift 3 menu right here for your controls. There is no Shift 2 menu for checklists and pilot's notes. There's a Shift 4 menu for your fuel and your oil. With oil you can click and hold the check to see how many quarts you got, and then you can click refill to refill it. You could also put a second passenger in your plane. This is Heidi. People of A2A know Heidi. You could change their weight, you can change your weight, you can change the baggage weight. And for Heidi, the passenger, you can make her silent. You can ever be calm. You can ever be nervous, so if you start doing things like forward slips or spins or anything, she'll start freaking out. And you can have fun where she actually gets excited about those things. And back to silent. Remove the passenger. You got your basic info up here. And then the cool thing about the fuel, this little needle up here is attached to a cork, a float, inside the fuel tank, and this is your fuel gauge. So when the fuel goes down, you see that float goes down. And that's how you know you're starting to run out of fuel. So we'll bring that back up to full. This one holds about 12 gallons, it looks like. And it'll burn about 4 gallons an hour, roughly, for an A65. This is a Continental A65 engine, 65 horsepower. It's got a fixed pitch wooden blade prop attached to it, just like the Porterfield I had. Got your basic stuff, the air filter. It's got all the same flight controls as a regular airplane, minus flaps. We have to take the lock controls down. That is held back with this this strap here, probably the seat belt. So lock controls off. Elevator, ailerons, rudder. There's no flaps. And then the only difference with the trim that you've normally seen in the 172 or other GA airplanes, here's your trim. It works like normal. It's got a nice sound to it. You go outside though and we look at the tail, and when you move the trim, the entire horizontal stabilizer moves. That's how it trims. There's no trim tab. Okay, so put that back to center. There's center. Now we're inside the cockpit. And this airplane, just like every other A2A airplane's got wonderful sounds for everything. Just great sounds. And we can open the door. And this is one of the reasons why I like the Piper Cub. You get this big door that opens up like this, and you can fly like this too, and it's really nice on hot summer days. This window comes down as well. Click it to bring it back up. And when you have Heidi in the front seat, she'll comment if she's hot or cold, and you can adjust the windows and doors appropriately as well, which is cool. So now getting this airplane started, you see with the lack of instrumentation, there's no battery master, there's just about nothing really. You got a primer here, you have fuel lever, you got carb heat. That's all the controls you really get. So there's no starter, no electrical system, you have to hand prop it. And so the procedure I used in my Porterfield is the same that you use in this Cub. So we'll turn the fuel on, make sure the carb heat is off, make sure the magnetos are off, make sure the throttle is closed. We'll prime the engine once to twice, 1 to 3 times, depending on the temperature. Colder the temperature, the more prime it's going to need, and you wouldn't prime after it just recently ran. So now we primed it. I'll hit the A key 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're up here, just behind the prop, and we can click and drag on it to pull it through. And if you listen closely, you can also hear the cylinders moving through. You can hear the pistons moving through the cylinders. And then that clicking is when the magneto would fire. And so you'd pull the prop through about 4 times. This helps get oil into other parts of the engine. Now we'll get it into a position where we're ready to pull it down and start it. So now I'll hit Shift A 4 times. That brings you backwards. We'll go ahead and put the mags to both. And then we're going to crack the throttle. And in the real world, if you had a passenger, you could have him sit inside and hold the brakes for you. Or you can tie the airplane down, or you can use chocks. So now it's all ready to start. I'm going to hold the brakes, simulating one of the ways of securing the airplane. And then we're just going to click and drag really fast down. And there it goes. So Shift A 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. That gets us inside. We make sure we have oil pressures in the green, and the temperature would take some time to warm up. So now we'll bring the throttle to 1,000. Has a little bit of a lag to it. That's more of a simulation error. It's just like any other piston airplane in real life, very responsive on the throttle. Okay, so now we got the airplane started and warming up. Go ahead and close the door. I just used Shift E because I couldn't remember where the click spot was. It can be kind of tricky closing it. Alright, so that's starting the airplane. The altimeter on this airplane is a little more basic. It doesn't have hundreds really sped out. You just have one dial with thousands of feet, and you spin this dial down here. You get one needle, and you spin this dial down here to move the whole card, and you just move it to the field elevation. And so the field elevation at Lincoln, we'll go over SkyVector here in a second. Field elevation is 121 feet. Go back to the sim. And 121 feet. This is 500 feet right here. This is 1,000, 1,500, and so on. So 120 feet is going to be right around here. Alright, so the altimeter is set. Otherwise, you have your tachometer for RPM, oil temperature, oil pressure, a compass, the altimeter, and airspeed. And the pitot tube on the cub. Sometimes you see it hanging from the wing. Don't remember what it is on this airplane. Alright, so those are your basic instruments. And then you have a stick instead of a yoke. Alright, so now that we got the airplane started, I'm just going to hit Control period to set the imaginary parking brake so I don't have to sit here and hold the brakes all the time. And let's go through SkyVector real quick. So SkyVector, address up there, is a place you can just get free charts, essentially, at least for the United States. And I'll go through all the options that you have on SkyVector. So starting with the top left, well, there's a list of airports. You can just search for airports. You can go to charts. You got United States and Alaska. Let's get back out. There it is. So then you can select the different types of charts for Alaska. So the different type of charts available are sectionals, terminal area control, which is attack. It's a lot more detail, and it's usually around Class Bravo airports. You got helicopter, en route high, en route low. These are IFR charts. En route high being anything above 18,000 feet. Low is below 18,000. I'm not sure what IFR area means. So it looks like it's just an IFR chart for a local area. Haven't seen those before. Sectional chart is what you're going to use just about all the time as a VFR pilot. And so let's go to the lower 48. Sectional selected. These are all the different sectionals in the United States, and they're named by a major city in their area. So you got Seattle, Klamath Falls, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and so on. Here's Detroit. And then with this menu, you can just click on one that you want. San Francisco is where we are, at Lincoln. There's San Francisco down here, Sacramento's up here, Lincoln's right down here. This is in Northern California. And so you can also get to these different charts by these buttons up here. See, we're on the San Francisco sectional. You could also have en route, and the en route charts are just labeled by their panel name. So you got L1, L2, and you can see that kind of coverage area down here. So here's L2, L1, L3. So those are the en route charts labeled. The highs are labeled with H, and here's a high. So anything when it has world in front of it, it just means it's covering the entire world on SkyVector. And so high en route charts are for everything over 18,000, like I said, and the normal routes are labeled jet routes, and these Q routes are for GPS. And low en route charts have Victor Airways, and Victor Airways you can also see on sectionals. And so the world VFR is all the sectionals stitched together. And so your Victor Airways are highlighted here in blue. And they're on the sectional chart because they can be useful to VFR pilots as well when you want to use VORs to help you navigate. But your primary means of navigation is visual, and that's why there's a bunch of detail on the chart. Now, learning all the symbols on the chart, you can go over to the legend. To get to the legend on SkyVector, you have to select the sectional that you're in, and it automatically has that button selected over here or displayed over here for what sectional. So if you move north, you see now it's going to give you the Klamath Falls sectional. Down here it's going to give you the San Francisco sectional. And as you notice, there's a couple other charts as well. Let's go to world. Here we go. So you got San Francisco TAC. This is a terminal area control chart, and you can see a terminal area chart, and it's got detail in this white box around this Class Bravo airport, and you can see how much more detail it gives you. You can see the roads a little bit better. You can see smaller things, smaller detail and terrain versus a regular sectional. So that's a TAC. And on the sectional, you can tell where a TAC is by this white border, this white square border. And then you have a fly chart. Fly chart is a way for VFR pilots to navigate around a Bravo airspace. And so these big blue arrows are recommended routes to go. So if you're trying to get from where we are, up here, down to Half Moon Bay, one of the ways they recommend you going is down through here. You could go down through here, below 4,000 if you're going, well, if you're in this area, and then below 3,000 over the Bay Bridge, down the coast here, and that gets you to Half Moon Bay. You just got to stay below the altitudes, and the altitudes of the airspace read like a fraction. So the ceiling is 10,000 and the floor is 3,000. You add 2 zeros to these. And so this means if you're below 3,000 feet in this area, you're not inside the airspace. The airspace is kind of stacked up like a layered cake. And this is chapter 14 of the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, which is a free resource. You can just Google that. So now back to SkyVector. Let's go to the sectional chart, which is where we're going to spend our time. Let's load up the San Francisco one so I can show you the legend. There's a legend up here. It tells you everything you need to know essentially. So all magenta airports are non-towered and all blue airports are towered. That's a big thing to note. And then over here, here's our airport data. And so when you have an airport, it gives you this data. This is the name, this is the identifier, this is the elevation above mean sea level, this is how long the longest runway is in hundreds of feet, so 3,400. This is its Unicom frequency, which is like services, like the FBO, because it's italicized, and then this C symbol means it's also the Common Traffic Advisory frequency, which is the frequency you use when you're telling other pilots where you are and what you're planning on doing. This RP12 means right pattern for runway 12. And then this one doesn't have an AWOS, an Automatic Weather Observation Service or system, which tells you weather over the frequency, so that's listed here. And all these things are over here in the legend. So the name, the identifier, control tower frequency. This C means follows a Common Traffic Advisory frequency. You got Unicom here, which is italicized, and it splits it off down here. So 285 italicized is elevation in feet. Bunch of stuff like that. So you can read all this info. Here's your obstructions, some airspace info, miscellaneous stuff. Some other important things we'll use today are the power lines. Alright, so let's look at doing a short VFR flight from Lincoln to Yuba County, which is where most of the videos have taken place. So you can right click anywhere in the chart. Let's right click near the airport, and you can click on plan, which is next to the airport info, and it puts a dot right there in the center, opens up this flight plan box. You can right click over here, plan, to get your destination or another point. So you got departure, destination, and if you wanted to add more points, let's say we're going further, going up to Chico, you could just right click over this town of Live Oak. And so if you want to put this town of Live Oak right as your waypoint, right click on it and click on plan GPS. So it puts a dot right there. And then you could keep doing that throughout till you get to Chico, if you want Chico to be your destination. So let's clear that with this button up here. Let's start over. Right click Lincoln, plan, right click Yuba County, plan. So now we've got a line, and you've got 304 degrees, which would be your heading, and 15 nautical miles is the total flight. And so what we want to learn today is how to read this chart to figure out where we are. So once we take off out of Lincoln, turn to a heading of 304, we got to make sure we don't get lost. It's such a short flight, but for the demonstration, we've got the town of Sheridan over here. This is a small town, this circle. And then just after Sheridan, when we're just past a beam Sheridan, like looking off a right wing, we should be crossing a power line. And you will see a railroad and a main road over here, this gray line. And the thicker the gray line, the bigger the road is going to be. And so you can see these back roads here are skinnier, and this is a thicker line. This is Highway 65. Then we've got the town of Wheatland, and just after Wheatland, it's hard to see, but you got the highway goes from like one road and it splits off into two lanes, more like a regular freeway. Also, right at the split is another power line coming through, intersects the railroad track and the freeway, and we have an obstruction, which is 225 feet tall, and the top of the obstruction is going to read 302 feet on the altimeter. This is 302 feet above mean sea level, and it's 225 feet tall above ground level. So that's one of the main points we'll use. And so we can click and drag on your route to physically move a point, but we're going to stay in a straight line. So we'll make this line roughly straight again, but right about here, and we'll make a point just like that. And then we'll make one more point right here for when we cross this power line of beam Sheridan. Plan that point. So the first leg is going to be 5 nautical miles. The next leg getting up to this point is going to be 4 nautical miles. And then the last leg getting into the airport, Yuba County, is going to be 6 nautical miles. So we'll do this basic flight now. Let's get back into the sim. And for the Cub, there aren't many checklists to run through. There's not much stuff to do at all. The only thing we need to know what to do is which direction we're going to take off on the one runway that they have here at Lincoln. And to do that, we got to figure out the winds. And this airport has a weather frequency. It's going to be 124.25 or 2425. I say it like that because all these frequencies are VHF, and all the VHF frequencies are going to start with a 1. So I just say 2425. You can say 124.25. And now I held down the Alt key to get rid of this menu up here. Hold down Alt, gets rid of the menu. Shift 6 is your radio. And to turn it on and off, you click this button up here. So that turns the radio on. And you can just mouse wheel with this dial to bring the frequencies up and down like this. Or you can put the mouse wheel over the specific numbers and change them. So we wanted 2425, 24, 25, and this brings up the weather. 015 at 5. We got clouds at 1,400 scattered. Alright, so 015 at 5 knots. Their main runway is 15 and 33. So 015 is coming from about this direction, and it's more favoring us taking off to the north. That gives us a slight right crosswind. Wind's coming from the right like that. And so real quick to show you the rest of the features on the A2A Cub. So we went over Shift 3, it's got your controls and other options. Outside air temperature, cabin temperature. You can also do hand towing. That's useful with the float version. There's a water rudder. Okay, Shift 4, we went over this payload and fuel manager. We talked about fuel, this is your fuel gauge, how to check oil. Shift 5, if you want to use this, I usually don't, because it's going to show roughly your position, and the whole point of this is to use a real section to try to do that. So I usually avoid this when I can, just to be more realistic. Shift 6 is the radio. Shift 7 is a maintenance hangar. Now this maintenance hangar looks different than the ones we've looked at before, because this is one of their older AccuSimmed airplanes. And this maintenance hangar is also the one they use on the P-47 and the Boeing 377 Stratocruiser. All the other airplanes have the more modern, detailed maintenance hangar, which I like. The good thing about this plane is it's not about the detailed maintenance hangar. It's a very simple engine anyways, and it's not about all the extra little features. But this plane flies like a Cub, and you can hear everything, and you can almost feel it. You can't feel it, it's a sim, but you can almost feel it, how this plane flies. It's very well done. Shift 8, there's no walk around, there's no nothing else. Those are all the menus you get, and that's about all the features. It's a very simple airplane. So we're going to take off to the north on 33, I think the runway is 33 or 35. We'll start taxiing. Now you notice this is a tail wheel. You can't see out the nose, in front of the nose very well. And so you gotta, when you're turning, gotta make sure you're looking ahead of where you're going. And then you want to do S-turns when you're taxiing on the ground. You also want to hold the stick back when taxiing. So see, I can see in front of me. Now we'll go this way, and I can see in front of me like this. Now we're going to taxi to the right to find a taxiway here. Keeping the stick back helps keep the tail on the ground. If you brake really hard, you could end up getting the airplane to nose over on the mains, and you'd get a prop strike, and that's not good at all. So we look left and right. We're going to go left to get to the end of the runway. So now we come around this turn. I'll keep the turn going. I'll look to the right. You can see it's clear out in front. Reduce the power a bit, slow down. Now I got the rudder in the other way. Now, another thing about tailwheel, it's not simulated quite as well in the Cub, but in the T6 especially, if you pick up the T6, if you watch the rudders, so when I want to go back to the right, if you want to stop this turn, normally you'd have to push opposite rudder to make it stop. And that's a good trick to use when you're in a T6 as well. So if you're turning right and you want it to stop turning right, you got to push a little bit of left rudder to make it stop doing that. It's all on the principle of, use the controls to make the airplane go where you want to go. And if it's not going that way, push harder on the controls. Don't be afraid to use full deflection. Don't be afraid to really handle the controls how they need to be handled to get the airplane to do what you want to do. We'll just taxi right up to the hold short line, because the run-up procedure is just going to involve checking the magnetos and the carb heat, and that's about it. Okay, so stick back so we can brake. And you can see it has heel brakes. In the rear airplane, this is more of a concern for transitioning, but the sim, it doesn't matter. You'd have your heels on the brakes and your toes on the pedals. It's a little backwards from the regular brakes you're accustomed to in modern GA planes. Anyway, so now we're holding the brakes. And we'll bring the RPM up to about 1700. And on any, light, small GA airplane, even like the 172 and the Cherokee as well, any mid-range RPM like this for a run-up works. Okay, so we're at 17. Left mag. Both. You can hear the RPM change. It's not changing a whole lot. Right mag. Both. And now we'll check the carb heat. There should be a slight RPM drop with carb heat. Went down about 50 to 100, and you can hear it go down. And now it went back up. And throttle to idle. Check our flight controls. Left, right. And stick back, stick forward. Okay, they're working. And the rudder is directly connected to the rudder pedals. And so that's already been tested during the taxi. And now we're going to go ahead and take off. Just like the 172 and Cherokee, it's just a matter of advancing the throttle to full power. So we'll get lined up. Alright, so with a tailwheel airplane like this, on the takeoff roll, we're going to want to get the nose down to get better visibility and reduce drag from the angle of the wings like this. So we'll push the nose forward, and that allows us to go a little bit faster. But the main thing is for visibility. And then we're just going to let the airplane fly off the ground, and that should happen around 60 miles an hour or so, maybe less. And then we'll climb at 60. Okay, so release the brakes, advance the throttle to full. And with tailwheel, when you can't see over the nose, you just gotta basically stare right at the center of the panel and use your peripheral vision to make sure you're going the right way. Okay, so now the nose is down. We can slowly ease the stick back. And we'll climb at 60 miles an hour, which is that 3 o'clock position on the airspeed indicator. So constant power setting, we just pitch for airspeed. So pull back the stick a little bit to get to our 60. There you have it. It's trimmed out pretty well. The airplane just flying itself, just like a Cub. Great visibility when you have tandem seating like this with the windows all around. Okay, so let's go ahead and get established on course. just past 500 feet, we need to turn to a heading of 304. And on the compass, there's a few compass errors to note. One is an acceleration error. If you accelerate the airplane, it's going to indicate a further north heading by a little bit, and if you slow it down, it's going to indicate a little bit further south, a more southerly heading. Another set of errors is your turning errors. And so when we turn, see we're near north, and so when we're making turns in a north area of the compass, you're going to want to overshoot your heading. So let's say we're trying to turn to a heading of 300, which is over here. So we're going to turn left. And now the compass is lagging behind. We'll roll out level about 20 degrees prior, and the compass is going to stabilize around 300. So you got to roll out about 25 degrees prior to the heading you want. So now let's go back to 330. And there it is, 20 degrees prior, roll out. A little bit of left rudder, left stick. And there's 330. So that's your turning error. So now let's go to 304. There's Highway 65. My bad, 304 is to the left. So you're maintaining about 1,000 feet. And this is why heading indicators are nice, because the compass bounces around a lot, but there's about 304. It's getting us in the right direction. So I'm going to go back to full power. I just slowed it down a bit, just for the demonstration of the compass, to make sure we don't get too far off course doing so. So now we got Highway 65 off to the right. There's a railroad track just to the left of it. And here is a power line. You can see it going off in that direction. Let's see, we follow it to the left here. Here it is. Power line continues to go that way. And so the power line is kind of going through the town a little bit to the left, and left of the town is north. This is the freeway, the highway, and the railroad. It looks like the railroad transitions to going on the right side of the road. So let's look at the chart with all that stuff. So power line is on the north side of town. We got the road, and that railroad track transitioned from the left side of the road to the right side of the road. So now the next town we should see is Wheatland. Wheatland's got a little bit larger road going through it. And then just after Wheatland is going to be where the highway splits. We see another power line going off like this, and we're going to see a tower or some other obstruction. Pause. So now I'm closer to 1,500 feet. And the Cub is really fun for cruising at low altitudes, but at the same time, if you're really trying to navigate and you're not familiar with the area, climbing a little bit higher is going to allow you to see these things better. So with this power line, this was the town of Sheridan. Remember, Sheridan is where we got railroad track left side of the freeway, transitions to right side, power lines on the north side. You can see all that down here. So then this town up here must be Wheatland, and we're flying straight at it. which is not how we're supposed to be doing it. You can also see our heading. We're at just about 320. We need to be 304, so let's turn to the left. And with the compass, to get the headings in the right order, I always remember you gotta drag the heading towards you like this. Otherwise, you can always just remember that smaller headings, smaller numbers are to the left, larger numbers, larger headings are to the right. Let's turn a little bit more left now to correct for our deviation. And I'm noticing we got a river crossing through 65 in that railroad track before the town of Wheatland. There goes the river off in that direction. I'm going to move the trim forward a little bit. I remember they said there was scattered at 1400, and we're kind of close to that. That's why we're starting to clip these clouds, so I'll put it back down. So just before the town of Wheatland, here's that river I was talking about. It looks like there's a small lake out there. Well, that's Camp Far West Lake. That is hard to see from this angle, but that's it out there. That's where that river's going. And here's the town of Wheatland. And I've just been full throttle the whole time. All you gotta do is just make sure you don't go past red line, and you keep full throttle. Looks like we're cruising about 76 indicated. Now another thing you'd want to do is maybe take the Cub out on a calm wind day, see what kind of cruise speed you get at low altitude. If you're around 1,000 feet, your true airspeed and indicated airspeed will be about the same on a calm wind day. If you have an extra wind, that could push up your airspeed a bit, and it's definitely going to be different from your ground speed. So, and we'll talk about wind correction later. It's a little hard to do in a sim if you got a lack of tools like an E6B flight computer, but we can go over that later. So now here's Wheatland. There's a road leading out of it, and that road leads out going this way somewhere. Anyways, there's a road going through, and I wonder if this smaller river will show up on the chart. We're starting to bank right a bit. Let's bank back left. Yeah, it looks like you can kind of see smaller rivers. So now the next point is we're going to look for the highway to split. So here's 65. Now if you look ahead, we got single, and here's where it splits into this double lane. Railroad track goes off to the right a bit, and looky here, here's that obstruction. There's a power line going through, going off that way to the northeast. Here's our obstruction on the right side, obstruction on the right side, power line going off to the northeast. Highway splits from one big lane to two separate. And then from here we should be able to see Olivehurst, Linda, Marysville, and the airport itself, Yuba County. So we see a town, and this town, if you take 65 before it turns, there's that town. So we have a big bend here. So we got a big bend, it's straight, it turns here. So where this turns is the town of Olivehurst. And so that's Olivehurst right there. And you can start making out the details of the airport right there. What you can also see way out in the distance is the Sutter Buttes. It's harder to see with the cloud cover we got, and we're kind of right near the base of the clouds. But the Sutter Buttes are right here. And so, if you ever get lost trying to navigate visually, you're going to want to find big landmarks and orient it to your airplane. Now, you can take note that you got a town on the left, and you got a freeway going up here, or some large road, and you're going west-northwest. You can see that there's a mountain ridge, a whole mountain mountain range going off that way. You got valley all around you, and if the cloud cover wasn't so bad, you would be able to see the buttes. You piece all those together, and you see there's this mountain range over here. There's another one over here. If it was a little bit clearer, you could see it. Straight out in front of you is the buttes. And so if you got a mountain range to the right and the buttes in front, you kind of orient your airplane so that you're facing the buttes, and you can start kind of figuring out roughly where you are. Then start looking for other details like this, Beale Air Force Base. That's pretty close. Go to the sim. There's Beale Air Force Base over there. Okay, so this was a good intro to navigating visually using a chart, comparing what you see in the real world to what you see in the chart. So now we're going to set up for getting into Yuba County. Their pattern altitude is 1,100 feet. We're at about 1,600 if you look closely on the altimeter. About 1,700 feet. And let's get their winds. So Yuba County Airport is, with these identifiers, if you're using GPS in the United States, if it's all letters, you put a K in front of it. If it's not all letters, like Sutter County, which is Oscar 52, this is the whole identifier. But this one, to plug into a GPS, would be Kilo, Mike, Yankee, Victor. So Yuba County Airport, there's the identifier. ASOS, Automated Surface Observation System, and there is a difference between ASOS and AWOS, and you can read about that in these publications. Got Aviation Weather Services, talks about more of the weather products like reports and whatnot. There's this older publication, Advisory Circular 006 Alpha, Aviation Weather, and the website I pulled this from gives you a couple chapters at a time. You can see it's older, it's got interesting graphics. It's still good, but it's got a couple chapters at a time. Aviation Weather Services, and an In a Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, we covered airspace. Chapter 11, it's got weather theory, teaches you everything about weather. Chapter 12 is Aviation Weather Services. It's another more modern document that teaches you about the reports. And one that you'd be more interested in right now is the METAR. This is Aviation Routine Weather Report, METAR. It breaks it down how to read them, gives you some tables to read all the different codes. And on SkyVector, so we've already got over the charts. You go to Layers, click on Layers, and there's different tabs. Click on the Weather tab. Right up here you got METARs and TAFs, so we've checked that box. And now over all the airports, you can see all these dots. So Yuba County, let's click on that green dot. It's doing a little bit differently because we got the flight plan over it, but let's go ahead and clear the flight plan. You can click on flight plan over here, clear it. Now we can, you just want to hover the mouse. You can so you hover the mouse over these, and it's hard to see, you can't make it any bigger, but we got KMYV, the identifier. 17 is the 17th day, Zulu day, and it's got your current Zulu time over here, which is Greenwich Mean Time or Universal Transverse Time. So on the 17th at 10:53 Zulu, it's an automated station, no person is there. All these zeros with the KT it means winds are calm. Let's find one that does have wind. So Lincoln, after the auto, you have winds are 070, 70 degrees, at 6 knots. The first 3 digits are the direction, the last 2 is the velocity in knots, KT. So back to Yuba County, we got 10 statute miles visibility. Sky is clear, that's what CLR is. You have temperature 9 Celsius, dew point 7 Celsius, and the altimeter setting is 3003. The remarks A02 means it can detect precipitation. A01 cannot detect precipitation. SLP is sea level pressure, and then the T with all those numbers talks about historical precipitation, and you can read about that in this document, Chapter 12, Pilot's Handbook, Aeronautical Knowledge. Another place to get weather is Aviation Weather Center. And you can go through this, go through the menus. We're not going to talk in detail about weather right now. Alright, so we can get the winds as 0, as calm. So that's one way to do it. Otherwise, we just get the frequency, 1847 for the ASOS. Go back in the sim, on pause, shift 6. Let's turn the radio back on. 1847. Now we get Marysville. So this is recording 032 at 5. Visibility greater than 20. 1400 scattered. Turn that back off. So that I'm just wondering if my active sky is reporting right. It says live real-time mode. Maybe it hasn't downloaded yet to update. It does update, probably pop away all the clouds. But let's start descending now. With all that, I forgot what the winds were. 032 at 5. So 032 is northeast, and so that favors landing on runway 32 versus 14. You could also land on runway 5. You got runway 23 going this way. And so let's do that. Let's land on runway 5. That'll give us a less of a crosswind. And if you look on the chart, there's no right pattern for Yuba County. That would be at the bottom like there is for Sutter County. So there's no right pattern for any of the runways. So we're going to enter with a left crosswind to runway 5. So it'll be left crosswind, left downwind, base, and final landing on 5. So now let's get down to our pattern altitude, which we're pretty much there. As close to 1,100 as we're going to get. If anything, right near the 1,000 mark wouldn't be too bad either. And I have the throttle pulled back, just a bit. This will be a little more controllable in the pattern. 2,200 RPM. Trim out the airplane. Look around for traffic. And you want to make sure you're on your radio calls here, because now we're going to fly directly over the runway. If someone is doing a landing and one around or an instrument approach, you could be flying right in their path. So left stick, left rudder. Now, a thing about coordination in this airplane, there's no ball, and so you can use the angle of the compass. So if I turn without rudder, you see the left side rises. The side that's rising up, push rudder, and see now it's level. If you take away the rudder, it goes up again. Push left rudder, it levels off. That's how you can stay coordinated with this airplane. So now we're turning left downwind for runway 5. Right stick, right rudder. Alright, there's no flaps. Usually in these planes I just like to reduce the power to idle and glide it in from here. And this is a good, at least it's a good thing to practice doing every once in a while in any plane you fly, at least any small plane you fly, to get a feel for what the airplane feels like in a glide. So let's come in high, left stick, left rudder. We'll do a slip as well. Slipping is a very good tool to descend, and you need to do it when you don't have flaps. Some airplanes you can't slip with full flaps, gotta read the manual. And so we climbed at 60, I also like to descend at 60, it makes it easy. You could also do 55. We'll keep turning in to final, and now I'm going to push full right rudder, and I'm going to use the ailerons to correct for drift. Similar to how you did it in a crosswind, but now the airplane is going to be pointed off the side of the runway. And you got to kick it back in, align straight with the runway when you get down to it. Just gotta watch your airspeed doing this. So now we're over the runway. Make sure the airplane points straight down the runway. There we go. Now hold the stick back. You want to make sure you're slow enough before you pull the stick all the way back. That gives you a little bit of aerodynamic braking. It forces the tailwheel on the ground more. And now we've got to start our S-turns again. And so since it's a cub, let's just go off here. Go in the grass. And we'll park it in the grass. Just like if you had a really busy air show or something, you got a bunch of grass parking area. Bumps around in the grass. Let's spin it around and park it here. Playing with the power and the brakes. Brakes aren't very effective, but they work. Okay, throttle to 1,000. And we just turn it off. The magnetos in this plane. Now we'll turn the fuel off. You can open the door. Remember, you can flap the door open too. It's a fun experience. Okay, let's put the tie downs, lock controls, and close the door back up. And the airplane's all shut down and secured. And so that's a good VFR flight, showing some landmarks, showing how to read SkyVector, and a little bit on the weather. And so there's a lot to go read for all this stuff, and we'll probably do a few more. We're going to start heading into IFR flying soon. So you got to brush up on your chart skills and VFR flying to know where you are and learn a little bit about the weather. If you have any questions, post them below. I always like any feedback, any critiques on the videos, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.